Hello and welcome to the Tea Party Howdy channel. Well, yesterday we did that video on Trump dumping the critical race theory to finally stop endorsing federal agencies saying whitey bad, whitey bad, whitey bad, and pretty much that's the only answer that works for them. So good, now he's saying that he's threatening schools that use the 1619 project in their curriculum and they will not be funded. But Joe Biden would disagree with him, but not for the reasons you're thinking. Trump is saying they're not going to be funded. No, no, no. Look right here in the first line. President Trump threatened to redirect funds away from the public school teaching an alternative view of U.S. history based on slavery. Yeah, see, Biden says that if you redirect funds, you didn't defund it. That's what he said about the police, because he said he wanted to not defund the police, but instead just redirect the funds. Okay. Also, and this is from the Washington Examiner, let's take umbrage with this line, not from Biden's point of view, but from right here. The alternative view of U.S. history based on slavery. That's not true. It's based on African slavery, because slavery on the North American continent it included all of the captured people or riffraff, and I do mean or, not and, from Europe were brought over here as slaves. And of course, many captured Indians were turned into slaves. All those people that do their little hissy fit about Columbus, that was their irking. So, yeah, it's not based on slavery. It's based on African slavery. Because for some reason, way too many people seem to think Africans were the only people used as slaves. And typically that same group of people that think that only Africans were used as slaves seem to think that slavery ended in the world when no, Africa is still filled with slaves. The word slave is from Slav, as in the Slavic country, because those were the first slaves, at least to create the term for what would eventually become English. And in the so-called free world, the slaves are now called what do they call it? Sex trafficking. Yeah, human trafficking. What do you think human trafficking is? It's slaves. Okay. So anyways, in a Sunday morning tweet, Trump said that the Education Department would investigate schools that seek to integrate the 1619 project, an ongoing New York Times Magazine propaganda fest that argues that America's founding began the year the first African slaves were sold to British colonists, rather than 1776, the year the United States declared independence from Great Britain. Boy, this article could have been written better. Let's see. Department of Education is looking at this. So, they will not be funded, Trump said in a response to a tweet that lamented, really, was he actually crying? The project being implemented into California public schools. Oh boy, and they're doing critical race theory here in the schools, but they're going to call it, what are they going to call it? Not racial equity. That's in the employment places. Well, anyways, yeah, California sucks, but you already knew that. Department of Education. Okay, let's go over here though. Let's go over to the Fox one. Trump warns schools teaching 1619 project will not be funded. No. They're just reallocating the funds. Ask Biden. They're still going to get all their money. Okay, the project is based on the premise that American history began in 1619. Cited that. See, Fox got it right. African slaves arrived in Virginia. Thank you. Wow, come on, Examiner, you're slipping. And that everything following this should be viewed through that lens. That's taking the word lens as a gigantic metaphor. The Pulitzer Center released a school curriculum based on the project, and Trump responded to that tweet, stating that California would be using it. Okay, but let's get into the history of the 1619 project, and then we're going to tear it to shreds, just for the fun of it. Trump's tweet echoes the sentiment of Tom Cotton. That's not it. Here it is. The project, created by Nicole Hannah Jones, was awarded the 2020 Pulitzer Prize for commentary. This is the same Pulitzer Prize that was given to the New York Times people that did the Russia things that turned out to be total crap. So Pulitzer kind of like, they don't pay attention to facts, they pay attention to politics. So take that for what it's worth. However, multiple historians have criticized the series of articles for multiple inaccuracies, including the argument that American Revolution was fought not to achieve independence from Britain, but to preserve the institution of slavery. Yeah, that's really laughable, particularly if you understand where John Adams, the main driver to create the vote for independence, and Ben Franklin came from. Because you will not find anybody more of an abolitionist, not of the police, that's very 2020, no, abolitionist of slavery in American history than you will the Adams family. Yeah, wrong Adams family. Okay. So, in a statement, no, I don't care about that. But anyways, yeah, so let's take a look at some of these historians. The revisionists are at it again. The 1619 Project is bad history, fueled by bad motives. So let's take out the word, no, bad history works. But instead of saying bad motives, let's just say ulterior motives. That their motives have nothing to do with teaching history, but instead Marxism. Every decade or so, or new, let's see, anyways. So here you can get into, and they start listing some, there's the Nicole thing. They start listing the historians that have said, yeah, I don't think so, here's why. And they start tearing it apart. I encourage you to look it up, because there's just so many things that have been falsified. So much so that we come over to here, and we see in the Atlantic, the fight over the 1619 Project is not about the facts. A dispute between a small group of scholars. Really, how big does it have to be? Come on, Mr. Chrome Dome. How many does it have to be? See, this is the whole thing with science. In science, Newton was against all of them. Newton was right. That was a small group of scientists. It was Newton versus everybody, and Newton was right. You can say the same thing about Albert Einstein. You can say the same thing about Volta. You can say the same thing about many, if not all, of the breakthrough scientists. Because the reason they were breakthrough scientists is because they were a small group. They were the one, and they got it right. So, Mr. Adam Sewer, I don't think that your narrative of a single one actually matters a lick. Let's see. The scholars and the authors of the New York Times Magazine issue of slavery represents a fundamental disagreement over the trajectory of the American society. It's total crap. So even the Atlantic had to admit, yeah, we're kind of being torn to shreds by some of these scholars that actually are bringing up really good points that we can't shoot down. So there you go. So the New York Times ended up creating a correction back in March. But it proves it's not fit for schools. The New York Times has finally admitted a key error in the 1619 Project. It disqualifies it from use in our schools. Well, it should have never been in there in the first place. So, yeah, they just take her to task. Look at this. In a tweet, Hannah Jones says that sometimes journalists, note she did not say historians, are trying to summarize and streamline, can lose important context. We call that the truth. So, what was the context lost here? In the original, she said that maintaining slavery was a primary motivation of colonists in revolting against England. We didn't revolt against England. We revolted against Britain. I had to learn that lesson myself. To say we revolted against England is like saying you revolted against California instead of the United States, if that helps you, because that was the analogy provided for me. That was one of the most bashed claims in the entire project. Now it reads that it was a primary motivation for some of the colonists. Well, wait a minute. Didn't we just hear from Mr. Adam Sewer, that a dispute of a small group of scholars? So we don't actually have to care if it's a small group, do we? So that when she says that, it's just some of the colonists, then we can take Adam Sewer over here and go, oh no, Adam Sewer said, oh no, they're not part of the mob. No, those are individuals. The mob, no, we don't have to pay attention to individuals. We're the mob. So, yeah, because the rules just don't last. But let's take a look at something a little bit newer. Post the apology and correction. Call Trump's attacks on the 1619 Project what they are. Censorship of American history. Dude, it's only censorship of American history if it's actually American history. If it's fiction, well, then you can say that. It's censorship of American fiction. And then that's a worthy debate. But it's not American history. They made it up. The woman is on the record right here saying that They're trying to summarize and streamline, and they can lose important context. She's on the record, dude. So it's fiction. It's not American history. Seth Cohen. Why don't you go hang out with Adam Sewer? You can go over hairstyling tips. Anyways, so we just thought we'd bring you the attention that Trump is doing his best to protect this country from racist. Because you have a group of people out there saying that they're anti-racist. One cannot be an anti-racist. You are either a racist or you are not. If you choose to be an anti-racist, then as Rush would say, not Rush Limbaugh, but Rush the band, if you choose not to decide, you still have made a choice. If you are an anti-racist, you are therefore still a racist. Because you are saying, you're being a racist against the race, and I don't like you because you, generalized group, yeah, you can't be an anti-racist. You can be against racism, but you can't be anti. The only way to be anti-racist in the immediate thinking without actually doing the process of like, irregardless of the fact, wait a minute, how does irregardless work? Regardless means without, irregardless means without? So now it's back? Anti-racist means no, some words just don't work. Another example of a word that has a prefix that's like, doesn't work anymore, social justice, political correct. If it's politically correct, you're no longer talking about correctness anymore. You left that behind when you added the prefix. Now you're just saying, it doesn't fit my politics, darling. Yeah, but it's still correct. Yes, but it doesn't fit my politics. Pay attention, now shut up. Or social justice. Dude, it's either just or it's not. Social has nothing to do with it. And when you try and say that it does, well, then it stops being justice. And it stops being anti-racist when you add anti on it. Now you're just a racist on the other side. Congratulations, very little. Thank you for watching. We'll see you in the future. Stay cool. It's still really, really hot out there.